And so we need to we need to keep our analysis really short, not well, 2 minutes at most, so that we can take comments. Because what we find is that people send a lot of comments and we don't get through them, and after a while they'll have comment fatigue. And they'll stop commenting, and so that we can take all the stories as well. Because sometimes we don't get to. This week we've actually been taking only 7 stories, which is
The stories that the first one I'm taking, for instance, is so
The first.
yeah. It has such many things on there.
that's the thing.
And there are many things you cannot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I don't
what
know how
I'll
we're
do is
going to do
what
it.
I'll do is
Eh?
on my stories I'll just
Adenike Oyetunde. Sorry.
I think I might actually join you when
So
you're
we'll do
done.
1, 3, then I'll come back to 2 and 4.
We'll do 1, 3.
No, actually, let me do 1, 3, 2. Then Kayode, you do 5, please. Then I'll do. I'll come back to 4.
Okay, you'll do 1, 3.
So I'll do 1, 3.
Then I'll do 5.
No, I'll do 1, 3. I'll come back to 2. Then you
Okay.
do 5.
Okay.
5 come back, because Adenike has 3 successively.
Excuse me. Mike's up.
I invest.
Good morning, Lagos, once again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're just in time. It's time for Freshly Pressed 981 on Smooth 98.1. My name is Kayode Baker.
And I'm Ayo Mairo-Ese. Good morning, Lagos. Thanks very much for tuning in.
Yes, and you're welcome to be a part of our conversation as always. We get to take you through what's happening also in the studio on YouTube as well. So to be a part of this, reach out to us on YouTube. It's youtube.com/smooth981, and also on Twitter, we're at smooth981fm with the hashtag FreshlyPress981, and you can get your messages across to us on WhatsApp. It's 0809-444-0981.
We'd like to say thanks to our analysts for joining us this morning for the conversation. Adenike Oyetunde, thanks very much for coming. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning. Good morning, both Ayo and Kayode.
Good morning.
Thanks. Adenike is Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter. We also have C joining us again this morning. Good morning, C.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Naya. Good morning, Kayode. Good morning, Adenike.
You can find C at mistaceee on
With 5 C's.
5 C's. 5 E's.
5 E's, excuse
5
me.
E's on Twitter. If you'd like to find out their handles, you can just go and follow us at Smooth981FM and use the hashtag FreshlyPress981. You'll see and follow them and also engage with them beyond today's conversation. All right, let's go on to our first story. I'll start with you, C. National Assembly leaders douse anger over ministerial list. So, the continued delay by President Muhammadu Buhari in sending the list of ministerial nominees to the Senate has generated serious concerns on the floor of the chamber yesterday. I do also urge it generated serious concerns yesterday, and I dare say even with Nigerians, a number of people have come out to ask the reasons for the delay. First, his first term, this was also what we had, but then people said it was his first time. We wanted to be careful in terms of choosing the right person for the job. But this is the second term. People thought it would be better. Can you take us to this story?
Okay, so once again, history repeats itself. The current administration, the current president was re-elected, and on the 29th of May 2019, he took the oath for his second term. Now, the elections he won, the elections in which he was declared the winner, the results were declared in February or March. He's had all that time to put together his proposed list of ministers. Unfortunately, he hasn't done that. Now, the Senate, the National Assembly, is primed to go on a 6-week recess at the end of July.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is
11th.
today's 11th of July. So basically, they have 20 days, 3 weeks, assuming the list is sent. And from the reports in The Guardian today, they're not even certain the list is ready because there's still some political agreements that need to be put in place. Now, what this portends for Nigeria is that the list is unlikely to get to the National Assembly in time, and even if it does, they will not have enough time, sufficient time to vet the list. And if they purport to vet. There will barely be rubber stamping.
Mm.
This is truly unfortunate, and it's so sad that we have to go through this process again.
All right. So, a number of people have asked the question, why? I know you're not in the best position to answer why he hasn't released the list, but in the event that they go on recess and he doesn't submit, the list hasn't been submitted, what happens? Because we had a conversation earlier this week about what will then happen. We have to wait for them to come back, what's our ministers? What's the implication of that, please?
So the implication is, if for whatever reason he's unable to send a list to the National Assembly before they proceed on recess, they're back middle of September.
Mhm.
And at that point, he will just be submitting the list, and they will start to vet.
In September.
September.
We had a comment coming, and so you can either debunk this or verify this,
Okay.
that they could actually come back for an emergency sitting if they had to.
How many of them?
Ayo, the truth of the matter is, this is summer. We all get to relax, re-energize our bodies for the long stretch towards the end of the year. I can guarantee you that once they proceed on this 6-week recess, to get this National Assembly to come back will be difficult, if not impossible.
I know that some people listening will probably feel like the right thing to do when we talk about patriotism and loyalty is to reconvene when at the invitation of the president.
Yeah.
But then when you consider that it's now a norm, you begin to wonder, how about we stop to discourage this particular pattern? And for that reason, I will stick with anyone who says, you know what, you had time to do what you should have done. It is time for me to take a break with my family. I'm taking a break and being by myself. So no, I'm not coming back.
All right. Thank you very much for that. That would be that means Nigeria, that or Lagos, that if we don't get a list or the verification exercise before the vetting exercise for the Senate, we won't have ministers up until around September.
Yeah, sorry,
October.
one quick point, last point. Because we do not have ministers, there's certain inactivity across all the federal ministries and agencies.
Yes.
Because we don't have the individuals to start implementing whatever programs they have in place. And this state of affairs will continue at the earliest September.
Yes.
September.
All right. Thank you very much, C. If you'd like to comment on this, we'd love to get your opinions, your thoughts on this one. The National Assembly leaders douse anger over ministerial lists. The full report is in the Guardian newspaper. Adenike, I'll come to you for the next one. Nigeria to have Africa's strongest military, says Vice President Osinbajo. He said this, assuring that the federal government will continue to give priority attention to the operational requirements and welfare of the Nigerian armed forces. He said he was reviewing, he was the reviewing officer. He said this while he was the reviewing officer during the passing out parade of 187 direct short service corps, 28 at the military training center.
Okay, so I'm going to quote him. He says that in a few years, Nigeria will become by far the greatest military force in Africa. And for people who do not remember, at a certain point in our history, well, up until a few years ago, actually, the Nigerian military had been deployed to several countries across the African continent to help.
Yes.
And that actually, gives you some, hey, after all, we're not just big. But when you look at as far back as 2016, that's the closest statistics in terms of number that I got for the number of military personnel that we have. And as we already know, the Nigerian military is the largest in the Nigerian armed forces. And it says maybe 200,000. So I want to believe that they are more than that.
Okay.
So if we're looking at that, my question then becomes, how are we going to become the strongest in Africa first if we do not have the numbers? We need the numbers. Apart from the numbers, we also need the equipment. We need all of it. But Shiva just said quite a number of things, and I'm going to read. He said that they are going to ensure increasing sophisticated propaganda aimed at making them to be more organized and lethal. He also did mention that the federal government is in collaboration with state governors and they're reviewing the security architecture of the country. He said we'll continue to take all necessary measures to tackle all forms of criminality across the country and to safeguard lives and property of all Nigerians. He said that we are building our own drones, but not only are we building drones, we're also making spare parts for aircraft. He said that There have been sophisticated minesweepers that are manufactured in the country. I needed to mention all of these things because it's insufficient for the vice president to just mention the Nigerian army is going to
Be the strongest.
strongest. He has also talked about the things that the federal government is putting in place.
Good.
But you and I know that one too many times we've seen videos, pictures from these guys that have been deployed, the state of their feeding, for instance. And we watch American films, even if we don't watch, we haven't been there. For people who do not have military family members, we read some books. We hear them recount their experiences.
Yes.
If things as little as daily feeding is such a big deal, then the question is, how do we then boost the morale of these
soldiers.
officers? Exactly. So underfunding, we know, is one of the biggest problems that they're having, and then demotivation, which cuts across different things that I mentioned. Now, the vice president has said we're going to become the largest and the most powerful. I decided to ask myself, what is the strongest military in the world? They're still passing around USA, China, and Russia, somewhere there.
Yeah.
And if you check, you see that Nigeria is actually on one of the lists that I looked for that has, weakest military. And I'm thinking, are we trying to fake it till we make it, or we're faking it till we see that reality? Or are we not going to put in realistic steps in ensuring that indeed our military doesn't just become the strongest in Africa by words, but also in action? There's a lot more that has to be done. Insurance for the military officers, insurance, healthcare. When you see these military officers in the abroad and their family members, it encourage you, go and fight, because they know that if the line
There's
of
something that's
duty,
put in place to
someone is going to
protect
take care of you. So
I mean,
there's so much.
in one day he was quoted as saying that the military officers should be willing to pay the ultimate price.
No, I don't think that they are disputing that they cannot pay the ultimate price. But we're also saying that so much is given, much is expected. So what much are you giving to them to expect so much more from them?
Right.
So that's that's what I feel. But the vice president has said that we're going to do so much in terms of deploying intelligence. I mean, these are some of the things that.
If that is done in 4 years, with the drone creation, parts creation,
Wait,
could
we're
it
talking
be?
about all these things apart from budgetary allocation? How
No,
much
none of it was mentioned here, but he said he didn't mention specifically budgetary allocation, but he mentioned that he subsumed it under some big grammar, and if you can infer that that's one of the things that he also did touch on. So I'm hoping that after speaking now, if they call him again to become a reviewing officer somewhere or some other exactly, we will not just hear, we'll say, okay, so the last time I spoke at so and so, I said we're going to do this, and between that time and now, so and so has also been done, and the government has also disbursed blah 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 blah. But fingers crossed.
Sorry, I must say this.
Yeah.
This is a speech full of sound bites, no details, no specifics. Nigeria is going to become the strongest military in Africa.
Yes.
How? What's the cost? What are the cost implications? How much of our current budget is allocated to the military? Now, our equipment is outdated. Let's tell ourselves the truth. When you hear the accounts of soldiers who have survived Boko Haram attacks, they tell you that the weapons those guys use are out of this world.
More sophisticated.
The latest weaponry technology, arms technology, doesn't come cheap. Can Nigeria afford it?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, C. Let's go to some comments. Let's start with Twitter. Twitter, we have Yomi Akarakiri here, who says, what is the job of the permanent secretaries? That's in relation to the first story, saying that the effect on ministries, departments, and agencies when we do not have ministers in place. So the differences in the roles of ministers and permanent secretaries.
Okay, the permanent secretary is the chief administrative officer for the military. There's certain decisions he cannot take in the absence of a minister. And then for certain ministries that have parastatals, the minister is the head of that board. And until the minister is appointed, you can't do certain things. There's certain contracts that the PS cannot sign.
All right. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Prince says the Senate resumed on June 11th. So what summer are they going for?
And then
Are we saying they shouldn't go? If we're saying that they shouldn't go, then it means that we all have to talk and mention that, look, if you resume in July, it means that you have to work up until August. It's because it's insufficient for us to want to have double standards. If this is a practice and it has been happening for so long, even if it's not on paper, Just imagine it's not on paper.
Okay.
It means that we have to also call it out to say, you know what, if you're resuming in July, you have to work up until August and then take a 1 month vacation and then come back.
This year is peculiar because it's an election year.
Yep.
So for subsequent years, they would have worked the whole year before going on a summer break. So I believe that's why it seems like they worked for such a short time.
They always go on vacation.
They always go. But that's a good
But
point.
then they
Adenike.
should be able to ask them to come back.
You
from
know, we
vacation.
always like to call them out, and but sometimes we've also corroborated with their practices, the wrong practices, and we've kept silent about it. And now that when we feel like it's not working for us, we think, hey, it's not. No. We need to go back. If it's for us to say we need to write it, have it on paper, and
change
write
the
it,
timetable.
let us do that now.
All right, thank you. Livy from Festac Town says, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. President is still Baba Gospel. This is the second term in office, for crying out loud. Congratulations, Super Eagles. I made virtually all Nigerians happy yesterday. Are you a happy
Nice
Nigerian?
plug-in.
I know, let us know.
Okay, this one here says, Mrs. Uche from Isola says, is the VP trying to impress us with the drones that high school students build in China? Nigeria's age.
Wow.
All right, David, we'll need to check that before we can take that comment. But Kenny Hitsuge says, I'm a presidential aspirant who didn't have at his fingertips the ministerial nominees who would help him actualize his manifesto even before his election was not ready from the word go. The president can't hold the National Assembly to ransom. Thanks a lot for your comments, Ken. And let's move on very quickly to our next story, C. Worrying or interesting, depends on how you look at it. NNPC hints of fuel pump price rise, says 145 naira cheapest in West Africa. Guardian has this report. Please take us through this.
Okay, so the report is correct. Nigeria sells petrol at a very ridiculous and cheap price. All our neighbors sell petrol for the equivalent of $1 per liter. So it's been clear for years that the price at which petrol is sold inside Nigeria is unrealistic. And that is why some marketers prefer to get the product and ship it illegally to neighboring countries and sell it a markup. So this is something that is long overdue. However, the question is this the right time to implement this? Because there are a number of issues we're all facing. The power sector is upside down. Power supply is really poor, and a lot to meet. If we're to match the prices our neighbors sell petrol at, we're looking at least 100% increase. So we're looking at least 300 now.
Can the average Nigerian afford that?
Thank you, Ayo. We've been on this minimum wage issue for like forever, and it still has not been implemented. And we all know that once there's a price in petrol, every other item spikes up. Now, when you have 100% increase in petrol, imagine what that does to transport prices. Imagine what that does to price of foodstuffs. Imagine what happens to business costs of people who are in business for themselves. Then, faced with everything else, are we sure we're at the brink of a revolution? Because truly, can Nigeria afford 100% increase in the price of petrol at this point in time?
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. See, let's move on to our next story. This one comes to Adenike. It's from Thisday newspaper. It says states recorded huge budget deficits in 2018. This is from the, this is a report released on Wednesday by the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative.
Okay, so they revealed that 36 states received 3.95 trillion naira as total revenues in 2018, but none of the states could fund their 2018 budget from their total revenue for the year. Now, they have a quarterly review, and it stated that considering the high levels of budget deficits and debt, it will be advisable for states to strategize and develop innovative ways of generating revenue in order to reduce their budget deficits and debt excessive borrowing. And also expenditure on critical development and investment programs can be embarked upon. And I needed to read that verbatim because if you read the entire article as reported in this day newspaper, it does go into length. Now, they say that a total, well, we have to say categorically that a majority of the funding, as we already know, total revenues comes from the Federation Account and Allocation Committee.
Yes.
And just a fraction of it comes from the internally generated revenues. Of all the states and the zones across the country from this particular report, the South-South zone has the highest combined revenue of 1.102 trillion naira. However, the Southwest have the highest IGR of 533 billion naira, with Lagos State generating the highest revenue of 382.18 billion naira. Now, Lagos is the largest player. However, the same Lagos has such a debt deficit, highest debt profile of 436.6 billion naira, while Yobe and Jigawa have the lowest of 36 billion and 45 billion naira, respectively. It's necessary for us to look at what the states are generating, because we already know time in a row that states can no longer fund what the
expenses.
Exactly. And the budgets, the allocations, the revenue, and all of it, expenditures, as this name implies, some of them have had to go above and beyond what it is they can do, because they have relied solely on what comes from the Federation account. It again opens and continues the conversation of why we should continue to push for states to generate their revenues internally. Lagos State is doing this excellently well, but then on the other hand, if Lagos State is generating so much, how is it that the debt is not, if we put it on the scale, the debt is also equally much? And this report is saying it's good that you're generating a lot, but we need to caution, sound a note of caution that you need to be slow and careful
with the rate that's borrowing.
Exactly, the rate that you're borrowing. If you look at the 6 geopolitical zones, the report, like I mentioned, says South-South has the highest combined revenue, followed by the Southwest, the Northwest, and the North Central, respectively. Now, they also said that Lagos has a total revenue of 501 that exceeded 3 zones, that is North Central, Northeast, and Southeast, as the case may be. Now, the analysis of the debt profiles on the state showed that 36 states have varying degrees of debt, like I mentioned, but we must, of a necessity, state the fact disbursements while paying little or no attention to internally generated revenues. For instance, apart from Lagos and Ogun states, fact disbursement exceeded IGR in 34 of the 36 states, and that is alarming. So it's good that we are saying, states are generating, but they can do a lot more, and it's necessary for us to keep them on their toes, so that we don't continue to donate money to safaris.
All right, thank you very much. We had to put that in. All right, let's go on to our next story. See, Senate fumes as number of Nigerians murdered in South Africa rises to 127. Earlier this week, we talked about the unfortunate killing of Miss Elizabeth Ndubisi-Chukwu recently, and now the Senate have talked about the high numbers of deaths in South Africa and asked for an inquiry into that. Let's take that story.
Okay, so once again, we're dealing with the unfortunate death of another Nigerian in South Africa. In the past 3.5 years, 127 Nigerians have lost their lives. Shocking. Now, what has triggered this is, as I said, the Deputy Director General of the Chartered Institute of Insurance, Mrs. Elizabeth Ndubisi-Chukwu, was in South Africa for a conference and was found dead in her hotel room. An autopsy was conducted, and it suggested that she was strangled and her death was unnatural. Now, the Senate is fuming once again that a Nigerian has died and is asking for investigations. Very well, we read that the federal government has dispatched a senior officer to monitor the ongoing investigation, and that they are liaising with the South African authorities to ensure that they get to the root of this. Now, my question is this. The previous 126 Nigerians who died, what's Nigeria doing about it? It boils back to what is our foreign policy and what is the value placed on a Nigerian life?
Monetary value, actually. Because I've always wondered if we have an equivalent for how much it costs for each Nigerian life. And if you find, I can't remember, there was a report and it was crazy. And I said that until we are able to equate that value, we'll probably not know the financial importance of what it is to lose one Nigerian life.
Yeah. Apart from that, if we take Israel or the United States, try attacking any national of those two countries. The full weight of the country is brought to bear on you. Well, here it's the reverse. And to discover that 127 Nigerians have lost their lives in the past 3.5 years, what has this administration done about it? beyond saying, oh, we're going to investigate, we commiserate with the families, and we'll ensure the perpetrators are brought to book. Have any perpetrators been brought to book? A strong message has to be given to the South African authorities that this has to stop.
All right, thank you very much. A few comments. Nini says, this petrol story literally depressed me. Haba, are we not just learning to manage our current situation? This is not the right time.
And Chikoze says, good morning all. How can one compare Nigeria with other countries who sell PMS at $1? Those countries value lives and have leaders who are patriotic. There is no nexus for the planned increase on PMS. Let the president and others start from something reasonable first.
Thanks a lot.
Let's move on to our next story. This one from Thisday. It comes to you, Adenike. It's about the NCDC cautions states against possible cholera outbreak. Now, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control has issued a public alert to states in the country over possible outbreak of cholera during this rainy season.
Yes, indeed. They've said that 75 suspected cases of cholera were reported from 8 local government areas in 4 states, namely Abia, Adamawa, Borno, and Katsina State. And they also mentioned categorically that none of the reported cases was laboratory confirmed and that no death has occurred. For those who do not know, basically cholera is a bacterial disease that causes severe diarrhea or dehydration, and they have mentioned, as we continue to say, once you notice that you have sudden watery stool, diarrhea as the case may be, please do not self-medicate. Get to the nearest healthcare facility, not the nearest pharmacist around your area. 2 different things, please. They mentioned also that the center was warning that states be on alert, and as we know it's raining season, please be very careful out there. Families are also encouraged to boil their water and store them in clean and safe containers before drinking. Adding that people should also ensure that the sales of bottled water, are properly are there. Wash your hands, as we know. Cook your food well before consumption. Make sure your raw vegetables and fruits are washed properly. And one other thing they talked about was open defecation. I'm such a huge, big. I don't know, like Nigeria is number 2 in the world with open defecation. So you, young man, fine driver, young lady, get to the nearest place where you can properly defecate. Whether it's number 1 or number 2, stop it. So,
Thank you very much for that. Don't forget, your messages still come to WhatsApp at 0809-444-0981. We see more messages here. This one here says,
on fuel increase, we're between a rock and a hard place. When will it ever be the right time for increase? Minimum wage can't be paid, infrastructure deficits, heavy borrowings, what's 1 trillion naira billed in subsidies. We didn't let GJ do the right thing, that subsidy removal then, and we're paying for it now. That's Mary Jane.
Okay, so let's move on to our next story. This one here, also from Premium Times, still comes back to you, Adenike. Yes, it's from Premium Times. How National Assembly protests turned violence. It's from the Shiite spokesperson, and it's extensive, but we want you to take us through the story.
Okay, so in a statement signed by Abdullahi Musa, a leader of the group's academic forum, NIMA, I beg your pardon, has said that injured officers were attacked actually by the policemen and not by members of the Shiite group. For those who do not know, the Shiites are demanding the release of their leader, Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, who was detained by the government since December 2015, and the claims that over 340 Shiites were killed by the army in December 2015 after the army accused Islamic sect of blocking the road. Now, it's very interesting to me because a former police commissioner, Sadiq Bello, is reported to have said that the police had their men put in within the protesters, and it is quite obvious that the police set up for use were the ones who caused the inflictions at the National Assembly and elsewhere today. And if this is coming from someone that occupied such a position, it also doesn't tally with what the police is saying, that the Shiite members actually did shoot at 2 of their officers. Okay. The Shiite members are also claiming that the number of what the policemen are saying that injured, they're claiming that about 40 of their members were injured, when in reality, almost 100 of them. So it's back and forth. And what bothers me is the Shiites actually said they went there because they had spoken to one of the members of the National Assembly who had told them that they had to come back and he was going to get back to them. And they waited for hours, days, and they didn't hear anything. So they decided to go back. It was supposed to be a peaceful protest. So now I'm wondering, at the National Assembly, is it sufficient that the National Assembly is, putting more gears and adding more security, because it feels like you are separating us from you. The reality is, when are we going to talk about what is happening? These people cannot continue to lose their lives. And if the claim that they're saying that police officers actually did kill themselves or shoot themselves, then I feel like a lot more has to be done. I don't want to say let's investigate, because that's what we've been doing for so long. But that's what the report, according to Thisday, is saying, and it is really, 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 really bothering me.
Thank you very much. As a way of mention, our last story, it's from the Punch newspaper. NAFDAC bans sale of snipers, others in open market. That was supposed to be for you, Steve, but...
Well, unfortunately, we'll just take comments before we go. So, not unfortunately take comments, but you cannot get into the story.
That's fine. That's fine.
So, we have Ben Maldiche here on Twitter, on YouTube, says, yet to see what the government has done about killing of Nigerians in South Africa. This incident is not the first time. Emeka Onelum says, on the case of cholera, more reasons why we need to clear our drains and stop open defecation. The truck drivers in Mile 2 Apapa Express Road openly throw their feces into the drains, and it is sad. And then we have comments here from Dami.
Nobody will treat your citizens better than you do. It's sad that 120 people plus have died in South Africa in 3 years. But what have we done in 1,000 deaths in North Central alone? If we don't value our lives, nobody will.
All right, thank you so much, Dami, and to everyone who sent in comments this morning. Thanks for your contribution to the conversation. A big thanks to our analysts in the studio this morning, Adenike Oyetunde at Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter, and C at Mr. C on Twitter. Follow us collectively at Smooth 91 FM to join the conversation for this and beyond the Fresh to Press 91 at 9 o'clock. We'll take in more detail one of the stories from this morning. Next up, we have Grapevine 981.
Good morning.